You've got butter in your fridge right now. Probably one of the big names, the one with the blue packaging or the round tub with the little green clover. You've been buying it for years. Your mum probably bought it before you. But here's a question most people never stop to ask. Where does that money actually go? Because that butter sitting in your kitchen, the one with a picture of a rolling British hillside on the wrapper, might actually be owned by a company based in Denmark or Canada, or it might belong to a private equity firm that paid 0 marks for tax conduct last year. Today, we're lifting the lid on the 5 most popular butter brands in British supermarkets. We'll break down who actually owns them, what's really in them, and, in some cases, the scandals the major retailers would rather you never hear about. And at the end, we'll show you 3 genuinely British alternatives that are doing things properly. Let's get into it. 1. Lurpak. Let's start with the one that probably feels most like an institution, that silver foil, that slightly smug trumpet player on the packaging. It's been on British breakfast tables for decades. During the cost of living crisis, it became almost a punchline. Lurpak tubs were hitting £7 in some supermarkets, which somehow made it feel even more prestigious. But here's the thing about Lurpak. It is not a British product. It's owned by Arla Foods, a massive European cooperative headquartered in Viby, Denmark. The same company owns Anchor, which we'll get to in a minute. Up until recently, Lurpak's biggest problem was the price. But in late 2024, something else happened, and it triggered one of the biggest consumer boycotts the British dairy industry has seen in years. Arla announced a trial across 30 British farms involving a feed supplement called Bovaer. What Bovaer does is suppress methane production in cows. It's Arla's way of chasing carbon reduction targets. The Food Standards Agency and the European Food Safety Authority both approved it, saying it doesn't transfer into the milk. Arla stood by it. Fine, but the British public didn't see it that way. Millions of people online, whether you agree with them or not, felt like they hadn't been consulted about synthetic chemicals being fed to the cows producing their butter. And there's a separate issue that got far less attention. In Sweden, the Patent and Market Court ruled that Arla had misled consumers by calling its products carbon neutral through offsetting. The court found the claim deceptive, so the very environmental credentials Arla uses to justify interventions like Bovaer, a court found those claims don't hold up. Arla's UK revenue is £3 billion. They can absorb a boycott. Whether British consumers should keep funding that machine is a different question. At Tesco right now, Lurpak's slightly salted, spreadable in a 400-gram tub will cost you £4.25. For a company that's been to court over misleading environmental claims, that feels like a premium you're paying for very little. 2. Flora. Flora might be the most interesting case on this list because the story of what happened to it tells you a lot about how the food industry actually works. Flora used to be a Unilever brand. Most people over 40 grew up with it. The sunflower on the tub, the adverts about heart health. It was practically part of the furniture. In 2018, Unilever sold off its spreads division, Flora, Stork, I can't believe it's not butter, to a private equity firm called KKR. The business was carved out and renamed the Flora Food Group, now headquartered in Amsterdam. So the brand you associate with British kitchens is now run by a private equity company with its registered home in the Netherlands. What did that change bring? Well, Flora shifted to 100% plant-based formulations. And here's where it gets interesting from an ingredients perspective. Flora Buttery and Flora Original are not butter. They're not even close to butter. They're emulsions. Refined vegetable oils including rapeseed, sunflower, and linseed held together with chemical stabilizers. To get oil and water to behave like butter, you need emulsifiers. The main one you'll find in products like this is E471. For a long time, regulators said it was fine. The European Food Safety Authority didn't even set a daily intake limit because it's technically processed by the body like regular fat. But a 2024 study in PLOS Medicine tracked 92,000 people over 7 years. People with a higher intake of E471 had a 15% higher overall cancer risk. Breast cancer risk up 24%. Prostate cancer risk up 46%. The researchers think it disrupts the gut's mucosal barrier, which triggers low-grade inflammation, and that's where the tumor risk comes in. Beyond that, E471 is often contaminated with compounds called 3-MCPD and glicidol, both classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as possible human carcinogens. In 2024, Flora Food Group received 0 marks for tax conduct from ethical watchdog assessors. 0. The multinational structure relies heavily on jurisdictions that are high risk for tax avoidance. Flora built its whole brand on the idea of being the healthy, responsible choice. That story has a few problems now. Before we get into the next brand, which honestly has one of the most disturbing stories in British food production in recent memory, if you care about what's actually in the food you put on your table, hit subscribe. We go through everyday supermarket products and pull back the curtain on what the labels don't say. The bell icon means you'll get notified when we drop something new. Brand number 3. Clover. Clover is made by Saputo Dairy. Saputo Inc. is the parent company based in Montreal, Canada. They've spent the last several years aggressively buying up British dairy assets, including the Davidstow Creamery in Cornwall. Now, about that half the saturated fat claim. Technically, it's true, but what that headline doesn't tell you is that Clover is an ultra-processed food. To get vegetable oils and buttermilk to behave like a spreadable butter, you need emulsifiers, specifically E471, the same one we just talked about in the Flora section. It also contains the preservative potassium sorbate, listed as E202. Potassium sorbate is used to stop mold and yeast growing in the product. It's what gives it that extended shelf life. For most people, you probably don't notice it, but there are some groups who should know about it. Some in vitro studies have shown that when potassium sorbate combines with other common food additives like nitrites, it can show genotoxic activity, meaning it may damage DNA. Roughly 10% of the British population has some form of chronic kidney disease, and for those people, potassium additives are a hidden source of dietary potassium that can push blood potassium levels dangerously high, a condition called hyperkalemia. And in children, sorbates have been linked to hyperactivity, asthma, and eczema. The Royal Prince Alfred Hospital recommends removing them from the diets of sensitive kids. None of that is on the Clover tub, just so you know. But the ingredient story is almost secondary to what happened in 2024, because that year, Saputo found itself at the center of one of the most disturbing animal welfare scandals British farming has seen in years. An investigator named Joey Carbstrong filmed secret footage inside Polshire Farm in Cornwall, a supplier to Saputo. What the footage showed was systemic animal cruelty. Cows are being whipped, punched, and kicked. Sick animals are being dragged by forklifts. Dead carcasses left to rot in view of the living herd. Saputo suspended milk collection from the farm once the footage became public. But the damage was done, not just reputationally, but in terms of what it revealed about oversight in these enormous industrial supply chains. When you're a Canadian multinational processing British dairy at massive scale, it turns out that what happens on individual farms can fall through the gaps very easily. Clover is currently around £2 to £3 in most major supermarkets, depending on the size. Whether that's good value given what you now know, that's for you to decide. Anchor. Anchor is a brand that works very hard to make you feel good about buying it. The packaging leans into British credentials. The messaging talks about Wiltshire. There are suggestions to support British farmers. It's all very reassuring. Except, Anchor is owned by Arla Foods, the same Danish-Swedish cooperative that owns Lurpak. The strategic decisions are made in Viby, Denmark. The British farmer story is a marketing layer over a Danish multinational. That's already worth knowing. But the ingredient story on Anchor's lighter range is where it gets more interesting. Anchor Lighter. Spreadable is only 34% butter. Just over a third of it is actual butter. The rest is water, rapeseed oil, which makes up 27% of the product, and buttermilk. That's mostly water and oil, flavored and colored to resemble butter. To stop that from separating or going weird in the fridge, industrial processing is needed. And this brings us to a category of contaminants called MCPDES, monochloropropanoidal fatty acid esters. They're formed as a byproduct when vegetable oils are refined at high temperatures, above 200 degrees Celsius. They're found in almost all blended spreads and margarines. When you consume them, your gut breaks them down and releases free 3-MCPD, a compound that's toxic to the kidneys and has caused tumors in animal studies. Here's the key point. These contaminants don't exist in traditional cold-churned block butter. They're a product of the industrial process itself. When you try to make vegetable oil behave like butter, you create these byproducts whether you intend to or not. Anchor Lighter. Spreadable also has a high salt content. 1.1 grams per 100 grams, and uses beta-carotene as a coloring agent to give it that yellow buttery look. So to summarize, Anchor, Danish ownership behind British branding, mostly water and oil sold as a lighter butter, artificially colored and containing processed contaminants that traditional butter simply doesn't have. At Tesco and Sainsbury's, the 400-gram tub runs around £4.45. At Asda, it's £2.75 on rollback. Brand 5, Kerrygold. Kerrygold is interesting because, in some ways, it's the hardest one to criticize on ingredients alone. It's made by Ornua, the Irish Dairy Board, and it's the second most popular block butter in the UK. The marketing is all pastoral imagery. Green Irish fields, grass-fed cows, a wholesome simplicity. And if you look at the ingredients on the pack, it's often just cream and salt. So what's the problem? Scale, mainly. And what that scale means for the British dairy industry. Ornua sells 12 million packs of butter and cheese every single week. Their UK operations run out of Leek in Staffordshire, where large volumes of Irish dairy come in, get processed, and go out to British supermarket shelves. This is a massive industrial operation, whatever the pastoral packaging suggests. The concern isn't really what's in the product. It's the size of the footprint. When an Irish cooperative this large dominates British supermarket shelves, the genuinely local British dairy farmers, the small family farms in Somerset, the independent creameries in Wales, find it harder to compete. The shelf space goes to the brand with the marketing budget, and Ornua itself is moving further from its pastoral image. The company is expanding into medical supplements and powder blending. It's a diversified industrial food business now, not a collective of small farmers selling butter. The image on the wrapper is decades out of date. At Asda, it's currently on promotion at £1.99 for 250 grams. But buying it doesn't support a British farmer, and the pastoral story Ornua sells you has more to do with marketing than reality. So there it is. 5 brands, a Danish cooperative, a Canadian conglomerate, a Dutch private equity holding, and an Irish industrial giant, all selling you a version of British dairy that has very little to do with Britain. This isn't the only story on British supermarket shelves. There are still family-run dairies in this country, places where the people making the decisions actually live near the farms, where the butter has 2 ingredients and you can pronounce both of them. Let's talk about 3 of them. Better alternative 1. Wyke Farms. Wyke Farms is based in Bruton, Somerset. They've been making cheddar and butter since 1861. Today, the business is run by the grandsons of the founder, Ivy Clothier, which tells you something about how it's operated. The butter itself is straightforward, pure British cream and salt. No emulsifiers, no preservatives, no E-numbers. The ingredient list is 2 items long. What makes Wyke Farms stand out beyond the product is the energy question. They're the first national butter brand in the UK to become fully self-sufficient in green energy. They run an anaerobic digester that converts farm and dairy waste into biogas and electricity, saving 20 million kilograms of CO2 annually. Their premium range, called Ivy's Reserve, is certified carbon neutral under the international PAS 2060 standard. That's a verified, legally meaningful certification, not a marketing claim a Swedish court had to unpick. They also publish a modern slavery statement and audit their suppliers through SIDEX. It's not glamorous stuff, but it matters. Yeo Valley Organic. Yeo Valley is based in Somerset and is the largest organic brand in the UK. They're family-owned, independent, and have built their whole reputation around soil health and biodiversity. Their salted butter contains 2 ingredients, organic butter and 1.7% salt. That's it. No hidden potassium additives, no emulsifiers, no processed contaminants from refined vegetable oils. Because their cows graze on certified organic pastures, free from synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, the butter naturally contains higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids than conventionally produced alternatives. The business is still in the hands of the Mead family. That means the profits from your butter go back into British organic agriculture rather than to global shareholders in Denmark or the Netherlands. At Tesco, the 200-gram block is £3.10. That's the most expensive of our 3 alternatives, but you're paying for certified organic production, a clean ingredient list, and a family business that has resisted the consolidation wave that swallowed most of its competitors. Better alternative 3. Graham's The Family Dairy. Graham's is based in Bridge of Allan, Scotland. The Graham family still runs it, and they work directly with over 100 farming partners across Scotland. The thing that sets Graham's apart, aside from the family ownership, is the quality focus. They specialize in what they call gold top products, butter and dairy from Jersey and Guernsey cows, which produce naturally creamier, higher protein milk. You notice the difference. Their spreadable options are made by blending high-quality butter with rapeseed oil in smaller batches. It's a simpler, cleaner process than the heavy chemical formulations you get from the multinational brands. A 250-gram block typically runs between £2.10 and £2.50, depending on where you buy it. Next time you're standing in the dairy aisle, take 10 seconds to look at the packaging differently. The Union Jack doesn't mean the company is British. Lighter doesn't mean healthier. Carbon neutral might not mean what you think it means, and half the saturated fat can still mean an ultra-processed product with a preservative that kidney disease patients need to actively avoid. The 3 brands to look for are Wyke Farms, Yeo Valley and Graham's. Family-owned, independently run, clean ingredient lists, British money staying in Britain. If you found this useful, hit subscribe and click the bell.